In 2023, I attended 26 games of AFL football, most of those being Fremantle games, the team I support. So I thought it'd be a good idea of, out of the 26 games I've attended this year all across the country, I would rank them from worst to best on the game experience, the actual game itself, how much fun I had being there. I'm just going to rank it all in one package. I'm going to try and not get my purple tinted bias glasses in the way and just put a fair ranking in front of me. But that being said, some Freo wins may be a little higher than some Freo losses, because that obviously does determine my fun factor at a game as well. So starting off in number 26, the worst game of football I attended this year was at Optus Stadium in round 17, where Carlton beat Fremantle by 53 points. I had no fun at this game, zero fun at this game. So first of all, I get to the game. I'm with Will, who you may know from the community, and I forgot on my SD card first of all, so the vlog stuffed up. And then, you know, Carlton, they've only got 2 wins on the trot at the time. We're not doing too badly. I think we just came off a loss against the Bulldogs the week before, but I had faith we'd bounce back against a mediocre Carlton side. There's 50,000 at the ground. It's our second highest home crowd for the year. I thought we'd bounce back and we go and lose by 53 points. It was the worst display of football I've seen all year from the Dockers. Absolutely dreadful. I had no fun. I had a Carlton fan sitting next to me giving shit from start to finish. I absolutely hated it. In number 25, round 4 at Optus Stadium, West Coast versus Melbourne. Melbourne won that game by 63 points. It was a bit of a random game to attend. I had no real reason to attend it, but I attended it. It was West Coast getting smashed, which is always good, but yeah, it was a real dead game, I won't lie. There was no excitement factor, there was no real amazing football play. It was just a bit of a slogfest to get West Coast out of the way. In number 24, round 14 at Giant Stadium in Sydney, where GWS beat Fremantle by 70 points. I'm very surprised this didn't end at the bottom of my list. I think something that goes into it is the whole experience I had at the game. Number one, it was my first time at Giant Stadium, so it was good to experience a new ground. It's in Sydney Olympic Park, there's some food places nearby. You've got all the Olympic stadiums outside the Giant Stadiums. You know, that was a good experience. And the night of the game, there was some festival on in Sydney, so you know, that made the entire game experience pretty good. On to the actual football. Disgusting. We lost by 70 to what was a bottom 4 side at the time. In number 23, round 6 at Optus Stadium, it was the Dockers Anzac game, and we bowed out by 49 points to the Western Bulldogs. So the game got feisty before it even started. A local beer brand in WA made Lobster Tears beer, as this was Rory Lobb's return game to WA ever since he left in a very dickhead manner. And then before the first bounce, all of our defenders went up and got stuck into him, as they should. But instead of doing it just before the first bounce, they did it all game. We lost track of the game, and then Rory Lobb bantered us after the game. It wasn't a good experience. In number 22, this is the first of 8 games from Gather Round in round 5 at the Adelaide Oval. It was the Friday night game. It was Sydney who beat Richmond by 42 points, 122 to 78. It was a really dull game. I got there a quarter late because I was at Freo Gold Coast before that. It was a really, really dull game and nothing exciting happened. I mean, Papley kicked 6, but like, Richmond were terrible, Sydney cruised past them. Yeah, it was pretty easy. In number 21, round 16 at Marvel Stadium, it was the Bulldogs who beat the Dockers by 29 points. And I had fun at this game. I was sitting with Blake, who's a Dogs fan. I was sitting with Pat and Jakey Rippon, who were doing a Melbourne Renegades punishment. So, you know, the entire actual match experience was pretty good. And for 3 quarters, we held up. But that 4th quarter is one of the worst Fremantle displays I've seen in quite a while. We just got absolutely obliterated. Justin Longmuir was chucking Andrew Brayshaw in the ruck. I mean, he wasn't, but like, the coaching in that last quarter was atrocious. Yeah, it was the last quarter pretty much puts it that low on the list. Cracking into the top 20, round 19 at Optus Stadium, it's the Swans who beat the Dockers by 29 points. We held in there for most of the day. It was a, you know, we were already shit at the time, so it was just good to see how we could compete with quite a good Swan side, and we did for most of the day, but Sydney just outran us. I quite enjoyed some of our losses at the end of the season, where it wasn't a complete overrunning, but we saw some young talent really shining in some dead rubber games. In 19th, round 13 at Optus Stadium, it was the Tigers who beat the Dockers by 15 points. This was a disappointing game, I won't lie. It could probably go lower on the list, but I'll put it here considering considering it wasn't too bad a margin, and we stuck in there for bits of the game. In 18th, it's another gather round game. It's at the Adelaide Oval, round 5. It's Geelong 136 to West Coast 89. I won't lie, as much as I love seeing West Coast get smashed, it does get boring at times. Apart from when Sydney are scoring 200 on West Coast, I mean, it was a dull game. I think people forget, West Coast had 5 goals in the first quarter or something. They were beating Geelong in the first quarter quite convincingly. But then obviously the Cats ran away with it. And that being said, I was quite excited still when the final siren sounded. Yeah! In 17th, round 23, the Dockers' last home game of the season against Port Adelaide at Optus Stadium, where we went down by 16 points to a top 2 contender. I thought we actually played really, really well in that game. They just outclassed us in the last quarter, but some of our young talent really shone that game. That was one of my favourite losses of the year, if you will. In 16th, round 15, they're up to Stadium. Finally, a Freo win appears on the list. We beat Essendon by 32 points at Optus. It wasn't the most exciting game. We weren't at our very best. Essendon were dreadful. But we got the job done in the end, and this was right after Sydney dropped 200 points on West Coast, so my mood was already pretty high. Talking of West Coast, in 15th, it's the round 3 derby where the Dockers want to beat the Eagles by 41 points. You might expect us beating West Coast to be higher on my list, but we were very bad. The first 3 quarters, it was pretty much even until West Coast got cut down to 1 or 2 players on the bench in the last quarter due to a mass amount of injuries, and we just automatically ran away with it because they had no interchange rotations. Yeah, definitely not one of the most convincing derby wins. In 14th, round 8 at Optus Stadium, we beat the Hawks by 69 points. This was one of my favourite wins of the year because Hawthorn were quite bad at the time. But it was just our football at its very best, and I hadn't seen it in so long that I was just really relieved to see us go and put a team to the sword. That was a real relieving game. And the fact we could put a score 117 on the scoreboard and only concede 48 was really promising. In 13th, round 5, gather round, Adelaide Oval. It's Essendon 104, Melbourne 77. This was sort of the warm-up to what was the absolute scenes that was the Port Adelaide Bulldogs game on that Saturday night on the Adelaide Oval Hill. The Bombers, good upset against the Demons, don't get me wrong, but the game wasn't that exciting, and I didn't watch a lot of it because I was on the hill, and when you're on the Adelaide Oval Hill, you don't really catch a lot of the footy. In 12th, it's another gathering round game. It's Adelaide 118, Carlton 62. Now, you may not know from watching the channel, but I absolutely despise Carlton, so this was fantastic to see. But the game wasn't incredible, I won't lie. In the first 5 or so minutes, there were 2 boundary line goals that opened gather round right in front of me. They were absolutely insane. But apart from that, it was a pretty dead game. The crowd was electric. It was a sellout. First ever game of gather round. So I guess that's why it comes up on the list this high. In 11th, it's another gather round game. And look, the scoreline may not suggest this was a fun experience, but it was arguably top 3 most fun experiences of the year at the footy. It was gather round, it was at the Adelaide Hills, it was Brisbane 152 to North Melbourne 77. I mean, this experience was so fun. It's an hour bus ride up to 300 meters above sea level at wherever this ground was in Mount Barker. It was such an odd ground. You're walking in, and I won't lie, I don't know how this was an AFL ground. The food selections were literally just a local canteen, a local sausage sizzle. I was standing in front of the most dead cheer squad I think I've ever stood in front of. The North Melbourne cheer squad did not make an absolute peep throughout the entire game, and they were actually playing pretty well for portions of it despite the score. I dropped an absolute sigger of a mark live on TV, and looking back on it, I don't know why I've gone for the overhead mark. So I'm not sure who kicked it. I think it was Darcy Ford. He kicked it very high, it's directly above my head, and I've gone for the overhead mark. And with the velocity it's coming down, I'm obviously going to drop it, and it's obviously a bigger pill than this. It is as easy of a chest mark as you'll ever get, and I've gone the overhead. I'm still absolutely gutted on hindsight about that, but we move, except it was on national TV. Cracking into the top 10, round 14, my first ever time at the Gather. It was Brisbane 97, Sydney 81. Now, every year, me and Cardman go on a random football trip to a random game of football that we think will be half decent. Last year, we did the showdown in Adelaide, and while it was a crap game, being at a Port Adelaide home game showdown was a really cool experience. We'd both never been to the Gather, so we thought we'd make the trip up. It was my first time to Brisbane since I was like a 1-year-old, so it was a very new place for me. Brisbane, the city, okay. Like, it's nothing astounding, but it's okay. The Gabba, the ground, very, very odd. You can tell it's a cricket ground, I won't lie. But I think the entire experience was a fun day out. The Gabba atmosphere is really, really good. Crouchy got us some good GA front row tickets. Sat with the Marmalade lads for the second half. And Sydney put up a really good fight for most of the game. One of the closer games at the Gabba this year. I really enjoyed my Gabba experience, and I definitely would go back, ideally for a Freo game. And now into 9th. May surprise you, but it's a West Coast game. It's round 16 at Optus. West Coast 77, St Kilda 85. Now, West Coast almost winning isn't the greatest proposition to me, but for some reason, this game was just really, really tense and interesting. West Coast were up by as much as 40 points in this game. This was to break like a 14-15 game losing streak. It would have been probably the biggest upset of the year, considering St Kilda was still battling for a top 5 spot at the time. And I also forgot to mention that this was the week West Coast were coming off conceding 200 and losing to Sydney by 170. And West Coast were up by 5 goals at halftime. I was sitting next to Pat, and he wasn't happy, let's just say that. Saints came away in the end with the experience and got home by only 8 points, but it was a really interesting contest, and it was actually quite a fun game to be at. Into 8th, it's round 21 at Optus Stadium, where Brisbane beat the Dockers by 3 points. I really, really enjoyed this game. I thought we played well from quarter 1 to quarter 4. It was a 4-quarter performance, but in the end, our young, shining talent got outclassed by a team that are close to premiership favourites this year. Yeah, I mean, what can you do about that? I laughed as soon as the final siren went, because I knew we just put up a fantastic fight, and we were just unlucky to lose. So, you know, it was a dead rubber game. I wasn't even gutted. I was actually really, really happy after the game. And yeah, a fun game to be at, because we almost, you know, created one of the all-time upsets for the season. In 7th, round 10 at Optus. This was my favourite Freo home win of the year. It's when we went and beat the reigning premiers, the Geelong Cats, by 29 points at Optus, 106 to 77. We scored well, we defended well, and we beat a team that was still in the top 5 hunt at the time. We thought we're probably going to make finals and come home strong, the reigning premiers. It was a fantastic win at the time. In hindsight, still a very good win, still my favourite win, but like, it wasn't as impressive as it was at the time. Coming into 6th, and you may find this selection interesting, but it's the round 2 game where North Melbourne beat Freo by a point. It was our first home game of the year, and I said before the video that I needed to take my purple tinted glasses off and not come from a Freo bias point of view, and this is where I'm putting this selection in. Because in reality, this is one of the biggest upsets of the year. North Melbourne actually beat us by 1 point. And until their win in the last game of the season, this was their last win on like a 20-game losing streak. I mean, there was absolute drama at the end of the game. I thought the umpire got the decision right in the end. My vlog doesn't suggest that, but we'll move on.
Oh, fuck off! Absolute tossing!
And coming in to the top 5 in 5th, round 22. At Optus Stadium, West Coast 33, Fremantle 134. We're back to the Freo bias, because this is what dreams are made of. We have been battered and bruised over the years in derbies, and we've just gone and beat the Eagles by 101 points mere hours after the Matildas won a World Cup quarter-final and sent the entire stadium and nation into mayhem. This was one of my better days in sport I've ever had. And to beat West Coast by over 100 points, I cannot take it for granted no matter how bad they are, because that is just something that maybe will never happen again. Coming into 4th, not the best game, but probably the best experience I've had at the football this year. Gather round at the Adelaide Oval, Saturday night football, Port Adelaide 70, Western Bulldogs 56. Best night of the footy I've had all year, potentially ever. The hill was going absolutely off. It was probably some of the heaviest rain you'll ever endure at the football, and it was just a real fun night out. Absolutely loved the Power and Dogs game, just being there. That was really all about the match day experience, because could I tell you what happened in the game apart from that Port Adelaide one? Nah. Into 3rd, another gather round game at the Adelaide Oval. It was the final game of gather round where Collingwood beat St Kilda by 6 points. I mean, this was a really interesting game, because Collingwood got out to a massive lead in the 4th quarter, and with even 4 minutes to go, the game was done and dusted. St Kilda went and kicked 3 in the final 2 minutes to bring it to a 6-point ball game with 30 seconds to go with a centre bounce. I was sitting next to a few Saints and Pies fans, front row. It was the final game of gather round. The vibes were high, sold out crowd. The Pies ended up pulling through, but what an end to a fantastic footy weekend. And in Second place, back to Gather Round. My favourite game of Gather Round. Round 5 at Norwood Oval. My favourite Freo game I've attended all year. It's the Dockers who beat the Suns 100-90. This was a really odd experience and one of my favourite footy experiences. We were playing at a local sample ground for AFL Premiership points, where if you went to the ground, you're literally just driving through a neighbourhood, and all of a sudden, it's an AFL ground. Again, like the Adelaide Hills, the food there is literally just a local footy canteen. The stadium was packed to the absolute brim, like there was no moving room whatsoever. The atmosphere trapped inside there was amazing, especially for two smaller clubs. The Freo cheer squad was going off. The Gold Coast fake cheer squad was going off. The noise coming out of there was electric. And the last quarter, I mean, it came right down to the wire. This was, our second win of the season, our first not against West Coast. It was a real relieving result, I won't lie, as we got the close win against the Suns with a few last-minute heroics from our boys. And coming into first, this is the only match that can be placed in first. The best game I've attended all year, and I'm going to say it, apart from Freo games with my Freo tinted glasses on, I reckon it's the best game I've ever attended. Round 16 at the MCG, Essendon versus Port Adelaide. Not necessarily the entire gameplay. I mean, the last quarter was special. But that kick after the siren, Dan Houston wins the game for Port Adelaide against Essendon after the siren at the MCG. And behind the goals, behind the Port Adelaide cheer squad, where Houston kicks the ball. I mean, unbelievable. 55 metres out in the pissing down rain.
This could be after the siren. To win the game for Port Adelaide. Oh, wow. I mean, he's kicked it. Port Adelaide.
The vibes in that Port cheer squad were unmatched, and I genuinely couldn't believe what I was viewing. I was only in Melbourne for a day. Earlier that day, I watched the Dockers go down to the Bulldogs, and then that night, I happened to attend an incredible game of football. Dan Houston, after the siren, went to the Arc. What a game of football, and definitely the best ending to a game of footy in quite some time. Alright, well there is, from 26 to number 1, my worst to best AFL games I've attended in 2023. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you are new. If you enjoy the content, want to see more throughout the finals, throughout the off-season, and leading into the 2024 AFL season, I'll see you all next time, and thanks for watching.